Hi. Okay, so it looks like we are now streaming live on Facebook. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. It's my afternoon. Paul, you're in LA, so maybe
My afternoon too.
your afternoon too. Great.
Sure.
My name is Anna, and I'm coming to you from the New York Open Center. And I have Paul Denniston here with me, who is an expert on grief yoga. And we'll be having a really lovely, meaningful conversation in the next 45 minutes or so. The New York Open Center is really proud to have Paul as one of its teachers. And I would like to say that we are the longest running urban holistic health education center in New York City. And we believe maybe in the country, and maybe we would say in the world. We are based in New York City, right in Midtown Manhattan. We have been a place since 1984 where people have come and gathered to train in holistic health and spiritual practices, to practice in them, to meet their kindred friends and family who are all on a path of inquiry into consciousness, holistic health, healing. We've also been a home base for teachers who come and teach with us and then deepen and extend in their teaching practices around the world. So we're really honored to have Paul with us here. One of the things that happened with COVID is that we stopped having a brick and mortar location in Midtown and now moved online. And what that's done is brought a worldwide audience to the Open Center, and we're really grateful for that. We will be going back to brick and mortar when things settle down and settle in. But in the meantime, we just really appreciate being able to have you here. Like now, you're halfway across the North American continent and we can talk together. So Paul Denniston is a real treat to talk with, a gem, a deep yoga student, 20-year yoga student, 10-year yoga teacher and trainer, and has created a form of yoga called grief yoga that really integrates a lot of different styles of yoga, looking at how we manage and support ourselves through loss and through all of the emotions related to grief. Paul is teaching in the Open Center's Art of Dying Institute and part of what we call the Integrative Thanatology certificate program. And I just wanted to make a mention that the Open Center has this fantastic professional certification that invites people to look at the process of living, dying, and death through fresh eyes, leaning in on the wisdom traditions, looking at the spiritual, psychological, social, all the aspects of living into approaching death. And so Paul will be teaching a 2-afternoon workshop this coming Sunday and next coming Sunday on grief yoga. Everybody is welcome to take this program. All the details can be found at the opencenter.org website. And those of us who are interested in the topic personally are invited, but particularly if you are a professional of any type working with those who are in some type of process around death and dying, then this Integrative Thanatology certificate program is something you'd probably want to look at. So how's that for an intro on different fronts?
Very good.
All right. So Paul, it's so nice to meet you. And I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you create grief yoga and what is it?
Sure, Anna. All right. Well, I'm originally from Texas, and I grew up in a religious background. My father, Baptist minister, my mama, a Christian school teacher. Never really taught how to grieve. If anything, it was judged, saying, you know, hey, boys, don't cry. Just go do something about it. Or a space of feeling like sadness could be a lack of faith. So, hey, you need to pray about this. or nobody really wants to see that kind of part of yourself. So, that's really what I did, is I kind of isolated, and I didn't allow anybody to see the sadness. But I also was a witnesser and seeing how a little bit of my parents handled it. And I would watch how my father would bottle up anger until it would boil and then it would burst out, and it would be frightening to himself and to the family. I would witness how my mother wasn't able to, let's say, as an example, go to her mother's funeral and hold regret for a lot of her life that she didn't do that.
Mm.
And so I would, just from learning from them, bottle up my anger. And as a kid, I was bullied, and it would boil inside of me until it would lash out, and it would be destructive, and it would be hurt other people. And the sadness also was hard for me to access because I didn't know what to do with these challenging feelings. And as I became older, I would try to numb them, alcohol or drugs. I did anything that I could to try to avoid the sadness, the pain.
Mm.
A lot of the times even just putting on a mask of what people wanted to see. But yet deep down there was this deep struggle that it was hard for me to share. And I went into a yoga class, in my 20s, and I'm 50 now, just so you know. So it's about 25 years ago, I went into a yoga class, and all of the unresolved sadness and anger and grief that I had been trying to run away from caught up to me within this little space of a yoga mat. And instead of running away from it, I decided to be with it. I decided to breathe with it and move with it. And within that experience, I had this powerful release in the class that it led me to a deep space of peace when I surrendered to it. And as I walked away from it, I was like, wow, I need more of this. And as I moved forward and became a yoga teacher, one of the things that I was really drawn to was how we would create intentions for the practice. Like would say, what's your intention for today's practice? I mean, I could say that, what's your intention for being here today? And as a yoga teacher, as I moved forward, I thought to myself, what if I created an entire practice with the intention of how you can move with grief, how you can channel these uncomfortable emotions in ways that can be empowering. I was doing it already as a movement teacher for actors. I taught at the Stella Adler Academy in Hollywood, and part of my work within that space was to help actors learn how to take whatever was suppressed and how to channel it to help them to find deeper emotional connection and to find deeper connection within others. And so in applying that, as I started to learn many different forms of yoga, whether it was hatha or vinyasa or kundalini or laughter yoga, restorative yoga, or even chakra dance, one of the things that I was drawn to, going back to intentions, was to really look at where we can get stuck within grief, guilt, shame, anger.
Mm.
They live in our body. The body remembers the pain and the trauma. How
Right.
can we choose to move with it using intentions within specific techniques and exercises that can help to, one, empower, but also as a space to help to open the heart?
Mm.
So I've studied under, Peter Levine and Bessel van der Kolk, and David Kessler. And so I really just started to become intrigued with using aspects of grief and loss and applying them to specific moving meditations to help heal the heart.
Wow. So I really hear that there's a focus on body as a tool, the physical body, and then energy, the energy moving through our systems and being expressed out, would you
Right.
say? Being
Mm-hmm.
expressed out. I've also heard you mention that yoga is um, an art and a science around awareness and being able to be present. So there's also like there's something in the presence and the awareness side of things that yoga supports that that is also helpful in moving through grief. Would you say?
Yes, and I think that when we're experiencing grief and loss, it's so normal for us to get stuck in the past or to have fear and anxiety of the future. The
Mm,
heart of what yoga is about is it's a compassionate presence of being. And within that space is how can we become present? How can we become compassionate and feel whatever it is that we're going through, and recognizing that it's so easy for us to be in here a lot, especially within grief. And what happens within grief too is that our mind can get very dark and it can turn inward, um, beating ourselves up or beating other people up. So how can we move from the head to the heart, and how can we honor whatever it is the body needs in a space of compassionate presence?
mm. So when I think of grief myself, and the things that have brought grief to my life, it feels overwhelming right away. You know, just like putting my mind in that space, I feel like I could drown in it. So, and I have drowned in it and then swam back up and gotten reset. So when I think of grief yoga, the thing personally, what comes up for me is, oh gosh, I don't want to go there. Oh no,
Don't
I don't
take
want
me
to, because
there. I don't want to go.
I
I
don't want
don't
to
want
go there. I'm going to drown again. And will I get back up? So I'm sure there's a reframe on that, but I'm sure I'm not the only one
You are not the only one. You
saying that
are
right now.
not the only one.
Yeah.
And I know it can be intimidating. It can. And it's interesting because truthfully, I mean, look, here's the thing. There's techniques in anger, and there's actually techniques in joy. So as much as I created the practice with grief yoga, it's really a practice that's not about physical flexibility, but more about emotional liberation, to allow ourselves to see what is the place that needs to get expressed. So here's the thing I think also about true grief is just love. Grief is love, and it is a reflection of that love. And so, and it is waves, and it can be exhausting. And we can also learn to ride the wave. We can learn to go through the wave. But if it's not addressed, then it's going to get suppressed,
Right.
and then it might drown us. So there is a way to ride the wave. And here's the thing, you can avoid grief, but if you choose to avoid grief, then you almost are going to have to avoid love. And grief is just the
Right.
price of love. So, it, it, and coming from a place of like knowing that I tried to avoid grief for many decades of my life, and I have actually arrived at a more peaceful and happier place because I gave grief the space to breathe. Now, look, every day is different. Some days are more challenging. And now that we're in the midst of a pandemic,
Right.
life is hard.
Right.
But I also know that it's okay to hold grief and to be with grief, and that it's not going to drown me if I hold space for it. If I
Right.
avoid it, of course, it's going to get overwhelming.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the space that the world is living in right now. Um, because even before the pandemic, all you had to do is turn on the news and see, have all the triggers right there. So and I'm going to ask, so let me say one thing and then ask you to unpack what grief is, because I think grief is a whole constellation of emotions. But the pandemic right now is really triggering for everybody. People are grieving. We're losing. We've experienced severe loss in many forms. Um, so can you talk to us about what the constellation of those of grief is? Like, what exactly is it? It's not just loss, I'm sure. And then also, what's the invitation or opportunity now in this historic time around working with grief?
I look at grief as a place of disconnection
Okay.
from someone, something that we loved, um, a loss. It can be a loss of I don't get to see my friends as much. It can be a loss of life and loved ones. It can be a loss of income and jobs. It can be a loss of vacations and trips. It can be a loss of the dreams that you have to accept that will never be. Whatever that loss is, it can be a breakup or a betrayal. That space of disconnection is what we're coming with within a place of grief. Yoga means union, connection, finding harmony within the mind and the body to lift the spirit. And that even though that we can find connection, it still can mean we're also experiencing sadness and anger and happiness and fear, because right now that's part of what this life experience is about. It's about learning how to move through these challenging emotions, and also knowing that how can you take care of yourself? Part of the work also within maybe a yoga practice too is to help you to connect to your intuition, your inner teacher, to help you to see and to know, how can I take care of myself in this struggling time? Maybe it's about restoring and resting. Maybe it's about taking a step forward or letting go what's not serving you. What can you intuitively connect to? And just for me personally, what I'm learning within this pandemic is I recognize that change has happened. And so the first step is I have to accept what is. Doesn't mean I have to like it,
Mm.
but I'm just going to accept what is. And how can I learn to adapt? How can I learn to adapt and to be with what is?
That's fantastic. I am a student, a very humble student of Advaita Vedanta Yoga through the Shivananda Ashram network. And Swami Vishnu Devananda, who founded the Shivananda ashrams in the West, says adjust, adapt, accommodate. Adjust. That is your greatest, one of your greatest skills, right? Just adjust, adapt, accommodate. And so I hear what you're saying, that what you're inviting is that we accept and that we work with what is.
And I'll just speak personally here. So my sister,
Yeah.
my younger sister, was my best friend growing up. She was my buddy. And around the time that I was becoming a yoga teacher is when she came and shared with me that she had advanced stage 4 cancer. And she had just had her third child. And at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm about to lose my sister. I was going to yoga classes at that time period to help me to process that grief. But I also recognized how she would adapt too, how she's like, there's a struggle here, but there was also a fire and a power that she was able to tap into, even though she's like, I'm afraid. I'm afraid that my children are going to feel like their mother abandoned them. I'm afraid of the pain. And for me to hold space for her to just be with what is, and to feel like I maybe it's okay that I don't have to fix her, because I come from a place of trying to fix another person if there's trouble. And sometimes within grief and loss, it's not about trying to fix, but to just be present. And I remembered this dark night that I shared with her where she was in the hospital bed, and I could see just the pain that she was going through. And I first just acknowledged and said, Ella, I see that you're holding on to so much pain in your body. And I said, I know that my family is like a little reactionary about me teaching yoga because they feel like it's a religion, and it's not a religion. But what I did to help to adapt her to say that it's okay is I'm like, look, I know that you prayed Jesus, but I also see how much pain you're holding on to. Can you just identify what the struggle is? And there was a part of her that she's like, I'm angry. I'm angry at God, at Jesus. Why have you abandoned me? And she's like, but I feel it's hard for me to express that. It's hard for me to, because I never felt like I could be angry and stuff. And so there were techniques that I did with her right there on the hospital bed that allowed just some of the pain to move through, whether it was just starting to use sound because I knew she couldn't do it. So it was just like there's a thing that I do that's called Canon Breath. I'm going to
Mm,
demonstrate it
that's
here. So
good.
it's where it's like you even bring your hands to your belly and you inhale 3 quick breaths through the nose, like, and then powerfully you just push through the belly and and you're using sound to help to move some of the struggle through, because it's easy for us to get stuck right here in our throat.
Mm,
There was a point in their space too where I'm like, can we just be angry at God right now? And like, let's just give a primal why. And there's a point too where I have an exercise called releasing the why, where you just lift it up and you just say the words, why? Whether it's sadness or anger, you allow why to be expressed, to move through. And in that space, she was able to express anger and sadness. There was another point where she was just feeling like stuck within this pain. And this other technique that I have that's called breaking the chains, I had her embody it like she was holding it right here and then pushing the elbows back. And what's happening in that space is she's opening up the heart space, opening up the throat space, and breathing all the way down into the belly. And again, these are energizing techniques to start to allow the pain to move through.
right. Mm,
And, you know, there was one point where the nurse came in and she's like, is everything going okay here? Because, they were hearing all of this noise, and my sister and I laughed together and like, yeah, we're good. But she's like, that was energizing. I needed that. Let me move forward. And so I helped her get out of her bed, and I placed my hand on her back, which was very bony, and I just kept walking with her in that space. And I heard her whisper underneath her breath, just you've got this. You've got this. And I was repeating it back to her, you've got this. You've got this. And almost like I was saying it to myself too, to just hold space, even though there's a part of me that's like just dying inside, seeing my beloved sister waste away, to just remind myself, I've got this. I've got this. And you know, later we moved back to her room and she lied down and she allowed herself to rest. But all we did in that space, she actually then said, could you please play the CD? And it was spiritual music that she could connect to.
right.
But it was a space that she allowed some of the pain to move through. It gave her space and opportunity to say it's okay to be
Right.
angry or sad at God. And it's okay to know when to take a step forward and to know when to rest.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's really beautiful. And your sister is with us. I know she's an inspiration to your work. And I appreciated where you took us into like really being able to understand exactly what, well, not exactly, but look at what does grief yoga look like and feel like. And so you mentioned vocalization, you
It's
mentioned
movement,
movement.
breath, and sound. That's
Okay,
what it is.
great. So what would a grief yoga class feel like, and or for somebody?
So it's what's in a grief yoga class is the spine of what the practice is about. It's called a cycle of compassionate transformation. And it's about becoming first aware of the presence, aware of where you're feeling stuck in the mind, in the body, starting to feel safe and being able to warm up the spine, just so, because our spine can get very tight and rigid within grief. So we're starting embracing a moving meditation to start to find ways that move, that we can feel safe, that leads us to the next step, and that's about expression. And expression is really about taking whatever is the struggle and the pain, using that as fuel for healing, that helps to tap us into our fire. So an expression is can be powerful, and expression can sometimes be energizing for people, and it can be depleting for some people. Think of it like it's a glass that is really about embodying your body. And with an expression, it's about emptying out all of the struggle and the pain, or even learning how to channel it. That then leads us into the next step, which is about connection. Connection is about flowing meditations to start to heal the heart. Connection is a technique that's now about filling the cup up. And there are three ways that we can learn to connect, and that's through self, connection with others, and connection with spirit. And within that space of connection in that way, which is all of those things that are embodied in a grief yoga experience, the pathways within connection that we explore are love, gratitude, and grace. And within these flowing meditations, they're really about how can you not grasp at the love, but hold the love and let it move through. That leads us then to the final step, which is surrender. And surrender, sometimes people are like, I don't want to let go. I don't want to let go of my loved one. And it's really about how can you surrender the pain and hold on to the love? How can you surrender and move towards a space of more peace, which is really more of a restorative practice that allows your body and your mind to soften. So that's the cycle that we explore within a grief yoga experience.
Okay. So tell me, I would love to dive in personally into more grief yoga, and I'm sure our audience, and I'm sure you have people all over the world who are tuning into you. How are you offering it these days? How do people access you? I mean, what is the Open Center?
I'm
Right?
well, I'll be at the Open Center on
Open
Sunday.
Center this Sunday.
Coming this Sunday. My website is griefyoga.com, griefyoga.com, and there's lots of different resources and things that you can access there, whether it be, free chair classes, there's courses that are there. There's a special like little class situation that I'm doing right now. So if you just go to griefyoga.com, there's lots of resources that are there. And I also do trainings that are specifically for grief yoga, teacher training for yoga teachers. And also I have a training platform called Grief Movement Training that's specifically for anybody in the helping profession, therapists, counselors, Reiki masters, end-of-life doulas, any people who want to try to like be of service and help others. There's a training platform for that called Grief Movement Training.
Great. So you're quite accessible even during these online times, let's say.
I'm learning to adapt into the whole online thing, and it's been something that I like having connection with people. And so, but one of the values of this is like, we're able to connect, how can we find a deep connection even if we're doing it in front of our computer?
Right.
So it's one of the ways I'm learning to adapt.
That's great. One of the first things I noticed about you when we started talking is that you really seem happy. Like your energy is light and you laugh easy, but you are an expert in grief. And so I want to know how that is, and how, and I know there's a good answer that I'm going to be happy to hear about.
I think that because I have allowed myself the space to allow grief to breathe, to be witnessed, and to be shared, it's allowed myself to access more happiness, more peace. So they live with each other. If, I found that as much as I tried to avoid grief or avoid anger, it wasn't allowing me to tap into happiness either. So here's the thing, each day is different, and some days I'm going to be just miserable and just challenged. And some days I'm going to be like, this is a good day. So it's really meeting with wherever I'm at this point. And again, this practice, I know I call it grief yoga, but it's really about emotional liberation. It's allowing yourself to the space to be with what is. But I was also just really drawn to the whole aspect of, instead, we all have struggle and pain. So
Right.
there's a possibility in a way that you can channel it, that can be empowering, that you can, even for me, there was deep pain within the loss of my sister, loss of loved ones, but I have found a new purpose within it
Oh,
because my sister is with me as I teach this practice, and she has a better understanding of what I do now. This There is a deeper level of devotion that can happen, and so there's through through decades of addiction, there is a space where I have come out to it, being sober now for 9 years, to where it's like now I can be of service and help those who have hold on to such guilt and shame.
mm,
So it's meeting the problem, but learning how to work with it and to be with it in a compassionate space. And that's a little bit of how I embody this practice.
that's amazing. I'm so glad you brought us to purpose, because I want to ask something. I'm very curious about the idea that we all walk into this lifetime and we have soul, I'm going to call them soul wounds. They're wounds that maybe we even signed up for before we arrived. And they come in the form of challenging parents, challenging circumstances, death, illness. And there's a philosophy of thought that says that they're actually, it's almost like homeopathic medicine. Those wounds, if we can work with them, give us the muscle to then provide the medicine for people as part of our purpose. And to me, it sounds like you, in hearing your story, took a whole series of, your parents, your sister, and other things, and it became a muscle. And now you've trained thousands and thousands of people in a form, however we call it, grief yoga, but in how to deal with these really challenging emotions. I don't mean to apply to you or prescribe to you, what, but that's what I'm seeing. And my question to you is, what made you not just like, oh, my sister's passed, and so, or my parents were like this, and just shut down and do yoga on the side? You turned it into something that became medicine and a gift for others that now can be used all over the world. How did how did you go in that direction?
I think I identified, going back to purpose, I kind of knew long ago that my purpose was to create things to help others. So there was a deep knowing already that that was what I resonated with. And so I think that I kept trying to find ways to connect to that. And so in some ways, like, I was a massage therapist for a while, and so one of the ways that I would help others and was I would give compassionate heart touch to the dying. And so that was a way that I was trying to help others. Um, and I, gosh, you know what? I think it's really about, part of me, it's like stepping up when the fear comes. And I got to tell you, holding space for people who have experienced loss that I could never even imagine, there's a part of me that it's scary, because it's like you're going right to a person's wound. And I don't know, I think there's just a part of me that is just like, maybe it's speaking of like soul talk. It's like my soul is like, show up, step up. And
Mm,
there's a, you know, the deep space of my child and within is just like, but I'm scared, you know, and it's just like, you know what, just face your fears and do it. And so I think that, I mean, within this practice, I'm basically creating a practice that I felt like I wanted to take, that I needed to take, that honored grief. But again, it's like the practice that I'm doing here is a little bit, it's like you're facing your fears. There is a fire within that is intentionally I'm tapping into. So it can help your soul purpose. It can help you to move forward in times of deep struggle and to recognize that part of my soul's purpose is to love and to find compassion and to forgive my parents when they didn't show up as the way that I wanted, to find a sense of empathy towards others, but also a place where I'm taking care of myself and saying, I recognize and I see your pain, but I don't have to take it on. I can be compassionate to it, but I don't have to hold on to your pain because I've got enough pain as it is, but I can hold space for you.
right.
Um, so it's just, I don't know. It's like I feel like I'm having a little soul diary kind of a thing.
Love it.
It's really about stepping up into fear and letting love take over.
Wow. Well, I need that. I know.
Me too.
I need that. I think most of be hard to find somebody who'd say that isn't part of what they need. It's amazing. I'm curious, you've got this class coming up, and in the short term, most likely, most of us will find you online in some way. How does yoga translate into the online experience? Um, what should we expect by that? Open Center is one example, and the next 2 Sundays from 1 till 4 Eastern time, I believe. But what will we experience in that time frame?
You know, since this pandemic, I have missed not being in community, you know, so there is something really powerful about doing an experience with others, but there's also something that within this space of what I'm sharing and taking people on, there's an intimacy that sometimes it's like maybe doing this in a space in your home that feels safe, that you can access. So I think that, you know, there are pluses and minuses of each situation, but I have seen how even online that there can be a powerful shift that happens, that again, it's like it's just going through a cycle of compassionate transformation, that even if you're alone in home and doing this in a room by yourself, that it's moving the pain through, and it's allowing um, your your courage to rise and for your love to expand.
Mm, wow. And then I'm sure, that we can experience you in the short term online, and then you are very young and strong, and we can get to you face to face eventually.
I
When
hope so.
right when the time
I
comes,
hope so, dear
when
Lord, please.
our
Yeah.
divine timing is, we would have access to you. I know you've taught at Kripalu, which is in the Berkshire Mountains of Massachusetts. You have taught in Esalen, I know, on the West Coast. So you are around and available, and will be increasingly so as we get back to face.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh. Is there anything that you'd like to share with our audience? There are people who are with us right now, but also people who will tune in later. Anything that we didn't say that would be helpful to mention?
Oh gosh. Well, just remember that, you know, at griefyoga.com, if you know, if you're a parent who's lost a child, there's classes for you in that. If you've gone through a breakup or divorce, there's classes at there. I would just recognize griefyoga.com is a resource that you can access. But just going even back to some of the basic essences of perhaps, you know, the yamas and the niyamas are basic structure of what yoga is. Some of the philosophy that they teach, especially when we're experiencing grief, is the importance of not being violent to yourself. That space of we can be so hard on ourselves when we're experiencing grief and loss towards ourselves and towards others. Ho- just becoming aware of when you're being violent and to yourself, and to lean into kindness. And that the space of tears, even though they might be like I'm afraid to go in it, every time I have a that I cry, I always feel better afterwards. And so there's a purity within tears that sometimes it's okay to move with that. Um, and one more thing, it's really about it's about surrender. There's a place where sometimes if we allow ourselves to let go of struggle, of pain, that it can actually soften and make there's a level of trust that can happen. And sometimes surrender can be really hard. And so in times where I feel like I'm having a hard time surrendering, I just say a soft prayer of just to help me to soften, help me to let go of some of this pain that weighs heavy on my heart, help me to move forward. What can I let go of here? And also to know that I'm still alive. What can I do today that will honor my life? What can I do today that will honor my sister's life? What can I do today that might be of service to another person?
It's beautiful. Lead us to the next. So Paul, you are been such a joy. I really appreciate meeting you and talking, and I feel like I've gotten so much out of this conversation, and I bet you everybody else has and will too.
Well, thank you for hosting this space. Thank you for letting me be your guest, and I'm looking forward to being with people at the Open Center on Sunday.
It's fantastic. So for our audience, please do visit our website, opencenter.org. And in it, you will connect with Paul's two afternoons from 1 until 4, these next two forthcoming Sundays. If you can't make it live, you can sign up for the class and then receive access to the videos of the class experience, so you can do it at your own time. That's a great way to be able to have access to this wonderful teaching, even if it doesn't quite fit your schedule. And particularly folks in Europe who may be asleep when the class is being offered. This is still very available to everyone. Also, just a shout out for the Integrative Thanatology Certificate Program, which is a very cutting edge, very loving program available to all people who are interested in a more conscious and spiritually, psychologically, socially aware understanding of death and dying, which also then means living. So lots of opportunities at the opencenter.org website and at griefyoga.com. So Paul, thank you so much. I look forward to knowing you more and meeting you more and diving into your work. And I really thank you for sharing time with us today.
Thank you, Anna.
Yay. So let me do this. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. I'm going to stop the live stream. So I'm going to say bye, stop.